It was after midnight when the headlights appeared, moving slow. Too slow for someone who was lost. On the porch, the dog lifted his head. Inside the house, the man was already moving. She had walked 4 miles to reach this gate. No car, no phone, nothing but a backpack and hands worn raw from weeks of working other people's land. She didn't ask for charity. She looked him in the eye and made an offer. I can work. Whatever you need. Just let me stay. He almost said no. He should have said no. But there are things a man carries for 2 years alone that he stops being able to name. The smell of a kitchen that no one cooks in. The sound of a house that answers back with nothing. A photograph left face up in the hallway. A woman who once smiled like she believed in something. He didn't know who she was running from. Not yet. 3 weeks later, a white truck appeared at the end of the dirt road, clean, new, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who always finds what he's looking for. The dog stood up, the woman went still. And the man who had spent 2 years learning to need nothing, stepped forward. Some gates, once opened, cannot be closed again. This is one of those stories. The wind came down from the mountains early that morning. It moved across the valley the way it always did in late March. Low and steady, carrying the last cold of winter in its teeth. Not the kind of cold that bites hard and announces itself. The quiet kind. The kind that just stays. Ellie Granger didn't mind the cold. He hadn't minded much of anything for 2 years now. That was either a blessing or a warning. Most days he didn't stop long enough to decide which. He was working the east fence line when the sun started dropping. The posts had shifted over winter. Frost does that. Gets underneath things and moves them without asking. He'd been resetting them all afternoon, boots pressing into soft ground. Hammer coming up and coming down in a rhythm that didn't need thinking. That was the point. Thinking too much, he had learned, was not always useful. Sometimes the body needed something to do while the rest of it settled. Fence posts were good for that. Repetitive, physical, something that stayed fixed when you fixed it. The Granger farm sat on 80 acres outside Kalispell, Montana. Flathead Valley. Big open land, mountains on 3 sides, sky that went on longer than seemed reasonable. His father had worked this ground for 40 years. Built the barn himself, kept the fences straight, kept his word. When he died, the farm had passed to an estate sale and Eli had bought it back with 12 years of Navy savings. And no real plan beyond the buying. That had been 3 years ago. The plan had not improved much since. The house was white, 2 stories, with a covered porch that needed repainting. The barn behind it was solid but leaning slightly. The doors hung crooked after a bad winter 2 years back. The fields ran east to a tree line and north to Harold Boone's property, and they were flat enough that you could see a long way in every direction. Ellie still appreciated that. The visibility. He'd spent enough time in places where you couldn't see what was coming to understand that visibility was not something to take for granted. Rex moved beside him as he worked. The dog was a German Shepherd, 7 years old. He'd come back with Eli from an overseas deployment that had no public name and no clean summary. Built solid, chest deep, thick through the shoulders. His muzzle had gone gray in the last year. Around the eyes most noticeably, Rex didn't bark without reason. He'd never needed to. Most people who didn't know dogs read his body and stopped walking forward before he had to say anything. That suited Eli. He'd always preferred things that communicated clearly without making noise about it. The two of them had settled into a life that worked because neither required the other to explain himself. Rex knew the property line. He knew which strangers needed watching and which ones didn't. He knew when to stay close and when to stay back. He knew when something was wrong before Eli did, which was saying something, because Eli's own instincts were not slow. The hammer paused mid-swing. Rex had gone still. Not the kind of still that meant a deer at the tree line or a rabbit in the grass. Different. His ears came forward, both of them locking. His body dropped a fraction at the shoulders, the way it did when he was reading something, and hadn't decided what it was yet. He was looking toward the front gate. Eli followed the dog's line of sight. Someone stood at the end of the dirt road. At the gate itself, they hadn't come through. Just standing there, the way people stand when they're not sure they have the right to take the next step. The late afternoon light was behind them, orange and flat, and from 200 yards it was hard to read much. But Rex was still. Not alarmed, not ready, just waiting. Ellie set the hammer down on top of the fence post. He stood there for a moment, watching the figure didn't move toward the house. Didn't move away. Just waited, all right, Eli said. To Rex, or to himself? Hard to say. He started walking. The dirt road from the east fence to the front gate was about 200 yards. Eli covered it without hurrying. He'd learned long ago that how you approach something tells the other person everything about what's about to happen. Fast means alarm. Slow and steady means you're in control of yourself, whatever else might be true. Rex walked at his left side. Not lunging, not lagging. Just there, as they got closer, details settled in, a woman late 20s maybe. She was wearing a canvas jacket that wasn't quite heavy enough for the temperature. Dark hair pulled back, though the wind had undone most of it. Strands across her face that she hadn't bothered pushing back. There was trail dust on her jacket, on her jeans from the knee down, the kind of dust that comes from walking unpaved roads for a while. She had a backpack on one shoulder, a canvas tote in her other hand. That was everything she was carrying. Her shoes were running shoes, not boots. The soles were worn almost flat at the heel. She watched Rex first, then Eli. She didn't step back. That was the first thing he noted. He stopped about 10 feet from the gate. Rex stopped beside him. The woman's eyes moved from the dog to Eli and stayed there. Dark eyes. Not hard, not soft. The dark kind that have learned to show only what they intend to show. A silence went between them. Long enough to be something. Then she spoke. "I can work," she said. "Whatever you need done. I'm not asking for anything I haven't offered to earn." Her voice was steady. Not the steadiness of someone who isn't afraid. The steadiness of someone who has decided that being afraid right now isn't useful. "Just let me stay for a while." Ellie looked at her. Then he looked at the road behind her. The long dirt road running back to the county highway, 1.5 miles away. No car, no one else. Just the empty road and the pale sky stretching over it. "Where'd you come from?" he asked. "Town," she said. "That's 4 miles, I know." He let that sit then, almost without meaning to, his eyes moved to her hands. She was holding the backpack strap with her right hand and the canvas tote with her left. The knuckles on her right hand were dry and cracked. The skin at the base of her fingers had calluses that didn't come from a day's work. They came from weeks of it, outdoor work. The kind done with tools and without gloves, or with gloves that wore through. She'd been working somewhere, with her hands. For a while before this, he looked up. She was watching him look. She didn't pull her hands back, didn't explain them, just let him see. No hiding what was visible. That said something. He had already formed the word no in the back of his throat. Reasonable. Sensible. The right answer for a man alone on a farm who didn't know this person and had enough complications already, and no particular reason to add more. The word didn't come out. Instead he asked, "What's your name?" "Sarah," she said. "Sarah Colton." He reached for the gate latch. The hinges protested the way they always did. A long groan of metal that sounded too loud in the quiet afternoon. He pushed it open and held it. Rex stepped back half a step. Making room, not retreating. Sarah Colton walked through. She didn't say thank you. She didn't exhale with relief or soften her face into a smile. She stepped through and stopped on the other side and looked at the house and the farm the way she'd been looking at the gate, reading it, measuring it against something. Ellie pulled the gate shut behind her. The hinges complained again. The three of them stood in the fading light. The wind moved through the dry grass at the edge of the road. Then Eli started walking toward the house. After a moment she followed. Rex walked between them. The front door opened into a narrow entry that led straight into the main room. The house wasn't dirty. Eli had grown up cleaning and maintaining things and putting them back in their places. And 12 years in the Navy had made those habits harder than bone. But there's clean and there's lived in. And this house was only one of those. A jacket hung over a chair back, one sleeve dragging the floor. Tools laid out on the kitchen table alongside an empty mug and a piece of paper that had been there so long it had become part of the surface. A sealed box in the corner that no one had opened. Clear counters. Done dishes. Everything exactly where it had been put. Everything put by one person who hadn't been thinking about how it looked to anyone else. Because there hadn't been anyone else. Sarah stepped inside and set her backpack against the wall. Kept her tote bag in hand for a moment, then set that down too. She stood in the middle of the room and looked around. Not judging, reading. The way you learn a space before you speak into it. Her eyes moved from the tools to the jacket to the hallway at the far end. At the end of the hallway on a small side table, there was a photograph in a wooden frame. From where she stood she couldn't have made out details. Just that it was there. She looked at it 1 second. Then away Ellie stood in the kitchen doorway. He hadn't invited her to sit. Hadn't offered anything. Just watching. Taking information the way Rex took information. Steadily. Without showing what it added up to. Bathrooms at the end of the hall, he said. The room on the right is storage. The one on the left is empty. She looked at him, understanding what he was offering even though he hadn't named it directly. "Thank you," she said. The first time. He nodded and went to start coffee. He heard her moving, not rushing, just getting oriented. A door opened and closed. Water ran in the bathroom for a few minutes. When she came back out, the dust was gone from her face, and she'd pulled her hair back properly. She looked younger and more tired at the same time. She appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Can I?" She gestured toward the cabinets. He said yes, though he wasn't sure exactly what she was asking, and she opened the cabinet and stood there a moment, looking at what was in it. Then she started moving with a quiet purpose, not performing helpfulness, just doing something useful because she'd said she would, and that was the kind of person she was. The onions from the basket by the door, potatoes from the bin under the counter, ground beef from the refrigerator, which she found without asking where it was, a scan of the spiced shelf, a loose collection of jars pushed toward the back, and she took 2 of them without hesitation. She knew what she was doing. Ailey sat at the kitchen table and moved the tools aside without thinking. He watched her. She didn't ask where the cutting board was. She looked in 2 drawers and found it in the second. She didn't comment on the state of the spice shelf, or the fact that the largest pan had a handle that wobbled. She worked around what was there. Rex came in from the living room and lay down near the stove, head on his paws, watching her, not tense, not suspicious, curious. That was different. He'd been watching her since the gate with a particular quality of attention that Eli had seen him apply to very few things and very few people Ellie noticed. Didn't say anything. The smell of the food started spreading through the kitchen about 20 minutes in. Onions softening in oil first, then the beef, then something from one of those spice jars. A real smell. Warm. The kind that moves through a house and settles into walls. He hadn't realized how long that smell had been absent. He sat at the table and looked at the rough grain of the wood near his coffee mug. He'd run his thumb over that spot 100 times. He did it now. He thought about practicality, about what it meant to let a stranger stay in his house. About what he knew and what he didn't. He knew her name. He knew where she said she was from. He knew she'd walked 4 miles, and her hand showed she'd been working somewhere before she got here. He knew Rex was lying by the stove without his body coiled, which was more information than most people would think to weigh. He thought about what was missing from the house for 2 years. The smell of food cooking, for one thing, the sound of another person moving through rooms. Something to pay attention to at the end of the day that wasn't his own thoughts. He wasn't romantic about it. He wasn't building a story. He was just noting what was true. They ate across from each other. Rex got a piece of beef from Eli's hand. He took it carefully, like he was evaluating it, then ate it in one slow, deliberate motion. The food was good. More salt than he'd have used, but the flavor underneath was real. She knew what she was doing with simple ingredients. That kind of cooking comes from somewhere specific. You don't learn it from the internet. You learn it from someone who learned it from someone. They didn't talk during dinner. At some point, Sarah set her fork down and looked at the window. She had the particular emptied look of someone who has been running on adrenaline for days and has just, for the first time in a while, sat down somewhere that isn't moving. Eli ate without rushing. When he'd finished, he stayed at the table a moment. Not for any reason. Sarah started clearing. He carried his mug and the coffee pot to the counter beside her without being asked. He was almost out of the kitchen when she spoke. "The salt," she said. Still facing the sink. "I know. My grandmother cooked everything heavy. I picked it up and I forget to undo it. Nebraska grandmother?" She turned around. "How'd you know?" "People who cook like they mean it," he said, "learned it from a woman. And that particular way with onions is a Plains thing. Southern does it differently." She looked at him a second. Something shifted slightly in her face, not a full smile, but a softening. "She died 6 years ago," Sarah said. "She's probably why I'm still functional in a kitchen." She paused. "Among other reasons," he nodded. "Room on the left," he said. "Door sticks. You have to lift the handle." He went upstairs. It was a long time before he slept. 3 days passed. The rhythm found itself quietly, the way rhythms do between 2 careful people who have no interest in forcing anything. Nobody sat down and made rules. Nobody explained what they expected. Things just found their shape. Sarah was up before him every morning, coffee made. She sat at the table with her own cup and didn't require conversation. He stood at the window and drank and looked at the fields in the early light, and she let him do that without interrupting it. He went to work. She found work. By the second morning, she had the chicken coop wire fixed. He'd been putting that off for 3 weeks. He came around the barn at 10 and found her crouched in front of it, folding the loose section back with a flat rock because she hadn't found the staple gun yet. He looked at the repair. It was done right. Hardware in town has the proper staples, he said. I'll pick them up if you tell me where. She kept working. But this'll hold until then. He went back to the fence line. By day 3, Rex was spending more time near Sarah than near Eli. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way the dog made decisions, without announcement. He was in the barn when she was in the barn. He was in the garden when she was in the garden. He positioned himself within a few feet of wherever she happened to be, and stayed there without requiring acknowledgement. Ailey noticed. He kept it to himself. The photograph was in the hallway on a small side table. He'd put it there 3 years ago when he first moved back in. Not because he wanted to see it. Because leaving it in a box had felt wrong in a way he couldn't quite argue with. It was a record of something real. Even if what it recorded was gone, the reality of it at the time had been genuine. Putting it in a box felt like disputing that, so it stayed on the table. He walked past it every day. After a while you stop seeing things that have always been there. The photo was from the wedding. July 2015. A small outdoor ceremony on a friend's property outside Missoula. Carol in a light dress, leaning slightly into him, her smile open. The kind of smile that doesn't know yet what's coming. Doesn't know it needs to be careful. He wasn't smiling. He never smiled in photographs. But his eyes were on her with the kind of attention he gave to things that mattered to him. He had been paying attention. That was the thing. He had been fully present, fully committed, entirely in it. He hadn't been careless. He hadn't been absent. He'd just been bad at saying out loud what he was thinking. Carol had told him that. Calmly at first, patiently. Then with more effort in her voice, Ellie, you can stand right next to someone every day, and they can still feel alone if you never say anything. People need to hear it. You can't just be there and call it enough. He'd disagreed. He'd thought presence was its own language. He'd thought showing up and working hard and staying reliable was a form of saying everything that needed saying. He understood now that he'd been half right. Presence mattered. But presence without words was like a letter with no address. The meaning was there. Nobody received it. On the 4th day, Sarah cleaned the hallway. He came in at noon and found her at the far end, wiping down the side table with a damp cloth. Moving carefully around the photograph, she had dusted the table's surface and the base of the lamp on it and cleaned the window above it. But the frame she had not touched. He stopped in the doorway and watched. She finished, wrung out the cloth, stepped back to check the light through the window. Then she looked at the photograph. 1 second. 2. Then she moved on. He went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. A minute later she came in. The wooden frame, she said. The one on the small table. The corner on the right side has a crack. Won't fall apart, but a framing shop could fix it pretty easily if you wanted. She set the cloth on the counter. It's a good picture, she said it like someone noting a fact. Not fishing, not opening a conversation she needed to happen. Just saying something true. Then she went back out. Eli stood at the counter. He thought about the photograph. About how long since he'd looked at it with any real attention. About Carol's smile in it. About his own eyes in it. About how much he'd believed, standing there that July, that he knew how to build something permanent. He'd known how to build things. He'd been good at the building. He just hadn't known how to let the other person see the blueprints. He looked out the kitchen window at the fields. Rex was out there, 20 feet from where Sarah was turning soil in the garden, sitting down, doing nothing, just present. Ellie watched them both for a while, then he went back to work. The evenings had their own shape. Eli sat on the porch after dinner. He'd done that since moving back. His father had done it too. There was something about the end of the daylight in Flathead Valley that deserved to be watched rather than ignored. The sun going down behind the Whitefish Range. The sky moving from blue through orange and settling into the particular deep purple that only shows up at altitude when the air is clear. He brought coffee out. Sometimes a book that he opened and didn't read. On the 4th evening, Sarah came out. She looked at the 2 chairs at the far end. His was obvious, worn in facing the mountains. The other one had never been used or not in recent memory. She took that one. Left a comfortable gap between them. She had D. They sat without talking. The quiet was the kind that's either uncomfortable or natural, depending on who's in it. Between them, it was mostly natural, which surprised him slightly. He wasn't usually easy with silence that included another person. The fields below the porch went dark in stages. Harold Boone's lights were visible to the east, a mile away. The old man kept late hours, always had. Sarah spoke first. She's nearby, she said, looking at the fields, not him, the woman in the photograph. You'd know if she'd moved far. He looked at her. Kalispell now, he said. Moved from Missoula about a year back. She nodded. He kept going. He wasn't sure why. Maybe the low light made it easier. Maybe it was that she'd said it plainly, no angle to it, and that made a plain answer feel possible. Her name is Carol, he said. My wife was my wife. She left about 2 years ago. He paused. There was someone else. Old friend of ours, Marcus Webb, real estate guy. The kind of man who always knows what to say in any room. Did you see it coming? Ellie thought about it. Actually thought, rather than reaching for the quick answer. I saw something, he said. Didn't want to name it. If you don't name a thing, you can keep not dealing with it a while longer. That works until it doesn't, and then it doesn't, and then it doesn't. The wind moved through the porch grass. Something settled in the barn. Marcus came to dinner here twice, Eli said. Before I knew anything, I cooked both times. First time was a beef stew. Second time I grilled steaks on the back porch. He looked at his coffee. I poured him a drink. We talked about the farm. I thought he was just a friend catching up, he exhaled. I was wrong about what kind of visit it was. Sarah looked at her mug. That's the part that doesn't go away, he continued. Not the leaving, not even the other person. Just that I sat across from him at my own table twice, and I cooked the food and I had no idea. He stopped. I trusted her completely. That's what complete trust looks like when it breaks. You're the last one to know because you weren't looking. You trusted her, Sarah said. That wasn't a mistake. He looked at her. People talk about trust like it's something you do carefully, she said. Her voice was quieter, now like she was talking to something inside the thought as much as to him. Keep your options. Stay a little guarded. Trust but verify. She shook her head slightly. That's not trust. That's a contract. Real trust is different. Real trust is choosing to believe someone when you can't actually prove anything. She paused. And it will always leave you exposed. That's not the downside. That's the definition. Doesn't mean you give it to everyone. No. But it means when it breaks, the breaking says something about them. Not about you. He sat with that. The sky had gone fully dark. Stars appearing in the west first, spreading east. Montana stars, which are something different from city stars. More of them, and they mean more. After a while he looked over. How long have you been running? He asked. She didn't pretend not to understand. About 3 weeks. From? I told you, Billings. You told me where. Not what from. A longer quiet. His name is Dean, she said finally. Dean Voss. I did bookkeeping for his construction company for 3 years. She turned her mug in her hands. He was good to me at first. The way some people are good to you right up until they aren't. Rex came around the side of the porch and lay down at the top of the steps, facing the dark fields. He never hit me, she said. I want to say that first because that's always the first question. He never raised his hand. A pause. What he did was slower than that. He made himself the center of everything. My apartment was in a building he owned. My car was kept at his business address. My phone plan was on his account. He managed our bookkeeping system, and I was the only other person with access to the full accounts, which meant I was tied to him professionally. She said it evenly, without performance. Like reading from a document she'd read before many times, until the words had lost most of their heat. When I tried to leave the first time, he didn't stop me, didn't argue, didn't threaten. He just said okay. She shook her head slightly. 2 weeks later I was back. I didn't have an apartment. My car insurance had lapsed because the renewal had gone to his address and I didn't know. My references at work were all people who knew him. She stopped. He smiled when I came back. He said, see, you need me. And the worst part, she stopped. Take your time, Eli said. The worst part was that I stayed for another 6 months believing some version of it. Not the whole thing, but enough. Enough that I kept telling myself the situation was complicated, not that the person was. She looked up at the stars. It took a long time to understand those are different problems with different answers. Eli said nothing. He let it be what it was. Second time I left, she said, I did it right. I took what I could carry, and I didn't tell anyone where I was going, because I didn't know where I was going. I've been moving since. Stayed with a woman I used to know outside Missoula for a week. Picked up work on a property near Big Fork after that. That's what the hands are from. He nodded slowly. Dean knows the general direction, she said. Her voice was even. He's patient. He's not the kind of person who gives up because it's inconvenient. He'll look until he finds something. Ellie looked out at the dark. I know, he said. She turned to look at him. You knew that when you let me through the gate, I had a feeling about it, and you opened it anyway. He turned his coffee mug in his hands. Rex didn't warn me off you, he said. He's warned me off plenty. Sarah looked at the dog stretched out at the top of the steps, head on his paws, eyes half closed. You trust the dog's judgment, more than most people's. Yes, a long quiet settled between them. Comfortable, somehow. The kind that happens when two people have said the real things and don't need to cover it with more words. Does it change things? She asked. Knowing someone might come looking, he looked out at the gate at the end of the road. Closed. The way it was supposed to be. Not tonight, he said. He stood, picked up his mug, and went inside. That night, for the first time in months, he went to the front door and checked the lock. Not a quick habit check. Deliberate. The deadbolt, the chain, the handle. Then the back door. Then the kitchen window latches. Upstairs, through the ceiling, the faint settling sound of Sarah in the empty room on the left. He stood in the downstairs hall. He thought, I don't know this woman. 10 days is nothing, he thought. Rex sat down beside her in the garden. He thought, the house smells like food again. He went to bed. April came in without announcement, the way it does in Montana. The snow line retreating uphill, ground softening. Days lengthening by minutes that added up so slowly, you didn't notice. Until one evening you looked up and found you had an extra hour of light you didn't have last week. The farm found its rhythm with Sarah in it. She didn't need direction. She looked at what needed doing and did it. The chicken coop wire, which she'd held together with a rock until the proper staples arrived from town. The collapsed section of cold frame behind the barn, which she rebuilt using materials from the shed, with no input from Eli beyond pointing at where the shed was. The vegetable garden behind the house, which had been untouched for 2 full growing seasons. She didn't announce any of this. She just worked. One morning he found a list on the kitchen table. Not a request, just a list. Compost materials. Column 1 available on the property. Column 2 needed from town. Quantities noted. He read through it. Clean thinking, practical. No wasted items. He drove to town the next morning and bought everything in the second column. When he got back, she was already outside. Not waiting for him, just already working. He left the bags by the garden. She picked up the first one and kept moving. It was that kind of arrangement. Rex made his choice on a Tuesday. There was nothing special about that Tuesday, no particular event. Just another April morning, cool and clear, frost still on the north-facing slope of the barn roof. Eli was at the equipment shed working on the tractor's hydraulic line. He heard the back door of the house open. Sarah coming out for the morning. Rex was sitting on the porch at the top of the steps. He'd been there since just after sunrise. Sarah came down the steps. She passed within arm's reach of the dog. Rex stood up, not alert, not cautious. Just stood up and fell into step behind her, the way he did with Eli. The way he had only ever done with Eli. He walked with her across the yard. He sat down when she reached the garden and started working. He settled his weight and put his head up, and stayed there beside her while she turned soil, not requiring anything, just present. Ellie set down his wrench. He stood in the shed doorway and watched this. He had lived with Rex for 7 years. He had watched this dog size up every person who came onto this property. Neighbors, delivery drivers, the vet, contractors. Rex had been professional with all of them. Polite in the way a very serious person is polite. Correct and distant, and never fully comfortable. He had tolerated Carol. That was the honest word for it. He had allowed her presence and not objected to her, and kept his distance and never chosen her. She had thought he didn't like her. Eli had told her, Rex liked almost no one this way, don't take it personally. But this, what Rex was doing right now, this was something else the dog had decided. And Rex's decisions about people, in Eli's experience, were not made lightly and were not wrong. He looked at Saza working in the garden, Rex steady beside her, and he thought about the list she'd left on the table, about the chicken coop wire, about the way she'd looked at the photograph in the hallway and said it's a good picture and left it at that, about how she'd walked 4 miles without asking for more than what she offered to earn. Something settled in his chest, quiet and still and not quite nameable. He went back to the hydraulic line. That evening he was late coming in, full dark when he got back to the house. Rex was inside already, lying by Sarah's chair at the kitchen table, where she sat with a small notebook working through planting plans, sketching rows, noting spacing, calculating what the soil needed based on what he'd told her about it. He washed his hands at the sink. There's food, she said without looking up. There was, on the stove. He served himself and sat down. They ate in the easy quiet that had become familiar. Rex redistributed himself to lie between their chairs. Outside, the night sounds settled in. Wind, a distant coyote, the old barn shifting. Sarah looked up from her notebook. You're not sleeping, she said. He looked at her. The stairs creak at 2 and 3 in the morning. I hear you. He looked at his plate. It's been like that for a while, he said. She nodded. I'm not asking about it. I just wanted you to know I noticed. She went back to her notebook. He stayed at the table after he'd finished eating. He wasn't sure why. The kitchen was warm. Rex was settled. Outside the window, the April dark was clean and cold and wide. He thought about what she'd said on the porch. Real trust leaves you exposed. That's the definition, not the downside. He thought about Dean Voss. About a man who had taken a person and carefully, patiently removed all the exits. Not with violence, with structure, with small things made necessary. That was a particular kind of deliberate. The kind that knew what it was doing and kept doing it. He thought about what it would take for Sarah to have walked away from that. To have left everything in place. Apartment, car, job references, and just walked out with a bag and 3 weeks of accumulated courage. That required something. Something that didn't just grow on its own. He respected it, he didn't say so. But he sat at the table a few minutes longer than he needed to. Rex put his chin on Eli's knee. Eli put his hand on the dog's head. Outside, the Montana dark lay over the valley, deep and wide and still. The gate at the end of the road was closed. He had made sure of that. Friday evening, 12 days after Sarah had walked through the gate, nothing had happened to cause it. No car on the road, no sound that didn't belong. Rex had been quiet all day, which was the most reliable indicator Eli knew. But the feeling came anyway, not fear. Something more specific and more useful than fear. Awareness. The kind that settles in the back of the mind and stays awake when you want it to rest. He'd had it on deployments before the obvious indicators appeared. He'd had it in airports, in parking structures, in rooms that looked fine from the doorway. He'd learned not to dismiss it. The feeling ran about 4 hours ahead of evidence, in his experience. That was enough time to matter. He sat in the living room after Sarah went upstairs. Rex lay at the bottom of the stairs, positioned there the way he positioned himself when he was covering something. Ellie looked at his phone. Dean Voss. Construction company in Billings. He didn't have much more than that, but he knew someone who could work with much less. Ray Donovan, former teammate, Seattle-based now, doing private security and investigations work for a firm that didn't advertise. They'd served together for 4 years. Ray was the kind of man who could find accurate information without generating any noise in the process. It was late. Ray would still be up. Ray was always up. Ellie typed a message rather than calling. He was better in writing than on the phone. Always had been Ray. Need background on someone. Dean Voss, Billings MT. Owns a small construction company, mid-sized operation. No urgency yet. Just want to understand what I'm dealing with before it becomes urgent. He read it over. Dead. Someone I know left his orbit 3 weeks ago. He's the kind of person who looks, sent it. He set the phone face down on the armrest. Rex looked up at him. I know, Eli said. The dog held his gaze for a moment, then put his head back down, not dismissing it. Just registering that it had been noted and the watching could continue now. Eli leaned back. He thought about what Sarah had described, the methodical removal of independence. The apartment in his building, the car at his address, the professional references all running through him. That wasn't carelessness, that was architecture. Someone had built that structure piece by piece with a specific outcome in mind. Keeping a person dependent isn't an accident. It's a project. He'd known men like that, not many, but enough to recognize the pattern. They were usually the most pleasant people in the room until they weren't. The type who made you feel seen and important and necessary, and then slowly, quietly, made sure you needed them to feel that way. By the time you noticed what had been built around you, the walls were already load-bearing. Sarah had walked out anyway. He thought about that. About what it costs to leave something you've been made dependent on. Even when you know it's wrong. Especially then. Because knowing it's wrong and having the structural capacity to act on that knowledge are different things. Abusers understand that. Eli did too, in his own way. He'd seen it weaponized in other contexts. The principle was the same. She had walked away with a bag and 3 weeks of resolve, and she had not gone back. He thought that was remarkable. He had told her so. He stared at the ceiling for a while. He thought about what the next weeks might look like. About Dean Voss finding this direction and following it. About the quiet farm and the unlocked gate, and what it would mean to have someone like that arrive here. He wasn't worried. Worried was the wrong word. He was preparing. That was a different thing. Worry looked backward and spiraled. Preparation looked forward and moved. He stood up, went to the front door, deadbolt, chain, handle, all solid. He tested each deliberately. Back door, same. He stood for a moment with his hand against the wood, kitchen windows, latches, both engaged. He stood in the kitchen in the dark, not turning on the light, looking at the garden through the window. The new bed Sarah had turned and composted and started. Small but real. The beginning of something. He went back to the living room and sat. Rex padded over from the stairs and lay down at his feet. The phone screen lit up. Ray, got it. Give me 2 days. Nothing else. That was how Ray communicated. 2 days meant 2 days, and the results would be thorough. Ellie put the phone down. He thought about the morning Sarah had walked in. The dust on her jacket and the worn-through shoes. He thought about the way she'd stood at the gate and made an offer instead of a plea. The way she'd looked at his house and started making it livable again, without being asked and without requiring acknowledgement. He thought about Rex in the garden, sitting steady beside her. He thought about what it meant that he was sitting in his living room at 11 at night, making sure the locks were right and contacting someone who could tell him what he was dealing with. He knew what it meant. He wasn't ready to name it yet. But he knew. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at Rex. He looked at the stairs that led up to the room where Sarah was asleep. Outside, the valley was quiet. The wide Montana dark stars across the whole sky. The fields running south to the tree line, north to Harold Boone's lights. The gate at the end of the dirt road closed. A man alone for 2 years, in a house that was only now starting to smell like someone lived in it. A woman who had walked 4 miles and offered work for shelter and had not lied about a single thing as far as he could tell. A dog who had made up his mind. None of it answered the practical questions. None of it told him how this ended. None of it was proof of anything that would hold up to scrutiny. But proof was not always how things worked. Sometimes you went with what the dog knew. Ailey closed his eyes. He would not sleep well. He rarely did. But the house was warm and settled, and Rex was breathing steady at his feet. And upstairs, Sarah Colton was safe, at least for tonight, in the room at the end of the hall. The gate was closed. He had closed it himself. That was enough to start with. April in Flathead Valley doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in pieces. A warm afternoon followed by a cold morning. Snow on the peaks one day, mud in the fields the next. The light changes before the temperature does. You wake up one morning, and the sky has a different quality to it. Something softer. Something that reminds you winter was never permanent, even when it felt that way. Ellie had watched 12 Montana Aprils on this farm, counting his childhood. He knew the pattern. He didn't need to think about it. What he hadn't expected was how different this one felt. Not the weather. The weather was the same, the farm itself was different. It took him a few days to identify exactly what had changed. He kept noticing things without being able to name the overall shift. The cold frame behind the barn rebuilt and planted with early greens. The garden beds turned and composted, edged cleanly. The chicken coop wire tight. The equipment shed reorganized so that the tools he used most often were now closest to the door, which he hadn't asked for and couldn't argue with small things. But they added up. A farm is a living system. It responds to attention the way any living thing does. 2 years of one man working it steadily, but alone had kept it functional. How barely. The kind of functional that's really just managed decline. Things maintained just enough. Nothing growing. Now something was growing. He stood at the kitchen window one morning with his coffee and looked at the garden. Real rows, actual structure. The soil dark and turned. He could see where she'd composted and where she'd left it to rest, and the difference in the color between sections. She knew what she was doing out there. He thought about her grandmother in Nebraska. The plains way with an onion, the heavy hand with seasoning. He thought about knowledge that gets passed down through kitchens and fields. The kind that lives in hands more than in books. He finished his coffee and went to work. Sarah came out at 8 that morning. He heard the back door and looked up from the tractor he was servicing near the equipment shed. She had a thermos and her work gloves already on. She walked to the garden without looking over at him. Rex got up from where he'd been lying near the shed doorway and walked with her. Ellie watched them go. He picked up his wrench and went back to the tractor. An hour later she came over. The north bed, she said. The soil's lighter than the others. Drains fast. If we get a dry stretch, it'll go first. He looked up. What are you thinking? Mulch. Deep layer. Or you could run a drip line off the irrigation system if it reaches that far. He thought about it. Line reaches. Valves on the east side of the barn. I'll look at it this afternoon. She nodded. Already turning to go back. Sarah, she stopped. You know what you're doing out there, he said. She didn't turn around, but he saw something shift in her shoulders. Not quite a shrug. More like a small acknowledgement she wasn't sure she wanted to make. My grandmother had 40 acres, she said. I spent summers there until I was 16, a pause. I know enough to not kill things. She went back to the garden. He looked at the wrench in his hand. He thought, That is not nothing. 40 acres every summer. That's not someone who learned from videos. That's someone who learned from soil. He went back to the tractor. But the thought stayed. The evenings kept their shape. Dinner, usually something Sarah had started before he came in. He finished it, or he made something alongside whatever she had going. Neither of them had discussed the arrangement. It had just happened, the way things happen when two people are practical and in the same space. After dinner, the porch. Coffee for him, tea for her. Rex at the top of the steps. They talked more than they had in the first week, not dramatically more. But the silences were punctuated more often now by actual sentences. He told her about the tractor, about the hydraulic issue he'd been chasing for 2 weeks. She told him about the companion planting she was trying in the east bed. Tomatoes and basil, squash with nasturtiums, practical things, farm things. But conversation has a way of widening even when you're trying to keep it narrow. You talk about the garden, and then about the soil, and then about where you learned about soil, and then you're somewhere more personal than you meant to be. One evening, she asked him about the Navy. He was quiet for a moment. 12 years, he said, joined at 22. Got out at 34 by choice? Knee, he said, third deployment. Came down wrong off a roof. Surgery held up for 2 more years and then it didn't anymore. She looked at him. You would have stayed, not a question. Yes, he said. Do you miss it? He thought about how to answer that honestly. I miss the clarity, he said. In the teams, you know what the job is. You know who's beside you. You know what success looks like. He paused. Civilian life doesn't work that way. The objectives are blurry. The metrics are hard to read. You do a good day's work and you can't always tell if it mattered. The farm matters. I know that in my head, he said. Some days I feel it. Some days it's just work. She nodded slowly, like someone who understood the difference between knowing something and feeling it. What did you do, she said carefully, after Carol left? The first weeks, he looked out at the dark. Worked, he said. Fixed everything that needed fixing, and some things that didn't. Put about 400 hours on that tractor in 3 months. He almost smiled. Not quite. Rex and I were outside from first light to full dark every day for about 6 weeks. I think I was trying to exhaust myself past the point where thinking was possible. Did it work? Temporarily. She was quiet. There's a version of loneliness, he said, that isn't about being alone. I'd been alone plenty. Combat deployments. You can be in a room with 12 men and still be fundamentally alone. That never bothered me. He turned his coffee mug. This was different. This was the kind that comes from having believed in something specific, and then having to revise the whole picture. Sarah was still, listening the way she listened, without filling space. I kept thinking about the dinner, he said. The 2 dinners with Marcus. I kept running them back, looking for the moment I should have seen, and the honest answer is there wasn't one. Not one I could have caught. Carol was careful. Marcus was careful. I was trusting. He stopped. Being trusting is not the same as being stupid. But it looks a lot like it from the outside afterward. It's not the same, Sarah said. He looked at her. Her jaw was set in a specific way. Like she was speaking from something she'd worked hard to know. Trusting someone who's decided to deceive you is not your failure, she said. The failure belongs to them. Entirely, she paused. I spent a lot of time with Dean believing that if I'd been smarter, or less trusting, or more careful, I wouldn't have ended up where I did. That's wrong. A person who deliberately builds a trap is not your mistake to own. Ellie looked at her for a long moment. It took me a long time to get to that, he said. It takes everyone a long time. She held her mug. That's how it's designed. The stars were out over the valley. Rex breathed steady at the steps. Something between them had shifted again. Wider now. More of the real things visible on both sides. He didn't try to cover it back up. 2 weeks into April, Rex stopped sleeping at the bottom of the stairs. Ely noticed it on a Thursday. He came down at 5 as usual, and Rex wasn't in his spot. Not on the living room floor either. Not near the back door. He found him in the kitchen, lying in front of the stove. Sarah's chair was pulled slightly out from the table, like she'd been up recently. A half-finished cup of tea still warm on the table. He looked at the chair. Then at the dog. Rex looked back at him. Since when? Eli said. Rex put his head down. Ellie made coffee. Sarah came downstairs about 10 minutes later. She looked at Rex near the stove, then at Eli at the window. He was at my door this morning, she said. Around 3. I opened it and he just walked in and lay down. He's never done that before, I know. She went to the counter and poured herself a cup from the pot he'd made. Is that a problem? He thought about it. No. She nodded. Sat down at the table. Rex didn't move from his spot by the stove. The morning went on. That day Eli took the truck to town for hardware. He drove the 18 miles to Kalispell, got what he needed from the farm supply store, and stopped at the post office on the way back. While he was waiting in line, his phone buzzed. Ray Donovan. He stepped outside to read it. Ray had sent a document, 4 pages, typed. The kind of document that looked like nothing in particular but contained a great deal. Dean Voss, 38. Owner of Voss Construction LLC, founded 2014. Small commercial and residential contractor. 11 employees. Clean business record. No complaints filed with the Montana Contractor Licensing Board, but a civil harassment complaint filed in 2021 by a former employee, female. Settled out of court, terms undisclosed. A second contact with Billings PD in early 2022, categorized as a domestic dispute, no charges filed. A third incident in late 2022, again involving a woman, again no charges, without a conviction. That was the most dangerous kind. Ray had added a note at the bottom. Handwritten, scanned. This guy knows how to stay just inside the line. Smart, careful. The kind that studies what gets people arrested and makes sure he never does exactly that. The women who've complained about him have not fared well in the telling. His attorney makes them look unstable. Be careful how you handle this. Don't give him anything to work with. Ely read it twice. He sat in the truck for a few minutes. He thought about Sarah in the garden, about the 3 weeks of running, about what she'd said. He doesn't give up because it's inconvenient. He'll look until he finds something. She hadn't exaggerated. He drove home. That evening, he did not tell her what Ray had sent. He sat with it. He wanted to understand it fully before he said anything. Putting fear into someone's life without a clear reason attached to it was not a kindness, and he was not going to do it carelessly. But he called Margaret Payne that night. Margaret was a lawyer in Kalispell. He'd worked with her when he bought back the farm. She was 60, direct, and she did not bill for every phone call. He gave her the basics. A woman who had left a controlling relationship. A man who had structured her life through his, the civil complaint and PD contacts. What Sarah had told him, if she wants to establish a record, Margaret said, she should start now, before he makes contact. Not after, she hasn't made that decision yet. She should think about it. A pause. The best time to build a legal wall is before someone tries to come through it, I understand. Is she safe right now? Yes, good. Let me know when she's ready to talk. My door's open. He hung up. Rex was lying near his chair, watching him with the particular attention he reserved for moments when something was being worked through. I know. Eli's said. The dog's tail moved once on the floor. It started on a Wednesday. Ely came in at noon and found Rex lying in the kitchen, which was not unusual. But Rex didn't get up when he heard the back door. He lifted his head and then put it down again. Ely crouched beside him. The dog's eyes were clear. No fever that he could feel. But when he put a hand on the dog's left hip, Rex flinched. A small movement. Enough. How long? Ely said, as if the dog could answer. He got his phone out and called Dr. Carol Tesch's office in Kalispell. The receptionist said she had a slot that afternoon at 2. He told Sarah at lunch. I'll come, she said. You don't have to. I want to. She didn't argue it further. She just got her jacket. He didn't push back. They drove the 18 miles with Rex in the back seat. The dog lay down and didn't try to look out the window the way he usually did. That told Ely more than the flinching had. Sarah sat in the back with him. She didn't try to comfort him with sound. She just put her hand on his flank, lightly, and left it there. Rex didn't move away from it. Ellie watched in the mirror for a moment, then watched the road. Dr. Tesch was 60, with short gray hair and the unhurried manner of someone who had been doing this for 30 years, and had stopped needing to perform confidence because she actually had it. She examined Rex thoroughly. X-rays, range of motion, palpation of the hip joint, which Rex bore without complaint but with a stillness that showed it cost him something. She sat down with Ely after. Degenerative joint disease, she said. Hip dysplasia, which he's probably had a mild form of for years. Came on gradually and now the compensation he's been using has run out. She folded her hands. He's not in crisis, but he's been in low-grade pain for a while. Probably longer than you've noticed. Ellie sat with that. How long has he been off his food? 2 days. That's pain behavior. His way of saying something's wrong. She paused. He's a stoic dog. The fact that it showed up in his eating means it's real. What do we do? Anti-inflammatories, adjusted diet, warmth. He shouldn't be sleeping on cold floors. No heavy running, no jumping. Gentle movement is good. Stairs twice a day, not 10 times. She looked at him. He can have good years ahead of him, but he needs to be managed now. Ellie nodded. How old was he when you got him? 11 months. We were deployed together from his 2nd year. She nodded. He's been working his whole life. His body knows that. She stood. Take the medication. Keep him warm. Let him rest more than you think he needs. Ellie stood too. Thank you. She shook his hand. He's a good dog. I can tell. Take care of him. Sarah was in the waiting room with Rex when Eli came out. The dog was lying with his head on her knee. She was looking down at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before. Something unguarded. Something that had nothing to do with caution or calculation. Just simple, open care. She looked up. He told her what Dr. Tesh had said. She listened without interrupting. On the way back to the truck, Rex walked slowly. Not dramatically. Just with the measured care of someone who has learned to manage a thing that hurts. Sarah held the back door open for him. She guided him up with a hand under his chest, not rushing him. Rex let her. In the truck, he put his head back on her knee. She kept her hand on him. Eli drove. The road back was straight and quiet. Fields on either side. Mountains to the west catching the late afternoon light. He watched the mirror twice. The second time he watched it, he left his eyes there a moment longer than necessary. Rex's head on Sarah's knee. Her hand steady on the dog. The two of them in the back of his truck on a road in Montana, connected by something simple and genuine. He thought about what Dr. Tesh had said. He's been working his whole life. He thought about 12 years of service. About a dog who had never asked for anything except to be useful and present. About how stoic bodies absorb pain quietly until they can't anymore. He thought that he understood that. He turned his eyes back to the road. He'll be all right, Sarah said. From the back seat. I know, Eli said. A pause. How do you know? She asked. Because he's not done, Eli said. He's not the kind that stops until it's time. She didn't answer that, but her hand stayed steady on the dog all the way home. That night, Eli moved Rex's bed to the kitchen, close to the stove. He found an old wool blanket in the storage room and folded it double for extra padding. He gave Rex the first dose of the medication wrapped in a small piece of beef. Rex ate it without protest. He stood over the dog for a moment after. 7 years. The deployment they didn't talk about. The nights in places that had no good names. The years on this farm. The way Rex had always simply been there. The way a fixed point is there. Something you can find in the dark without looking. You don't say thank you to a dog. They don't need it the way people do. But Eli put his hand on Rex's head and held it there. Rex sighed. That was all. Sarah appeared in the doorway. She had her tea. She looked at the two of them. Good spot, she said quietly. Meaning the bed, the stove, the setup. He's not supposed to do stairs more than twice, Eli said. I'll sleep down here for a while. Keep an eye. She nodded. She didn't say it was unnecessary or tell him he was being excessive. She just accepted it the way she accepted most things, as a fact about the person in front of her. I'll get up at 3, she said. Check on him. You sleep, Sarah. You're not sleeping anyway, she said. At least one of us should. She went back upstairs. He stood in the kitchen with Rex. After a while he sat down on the floor with his back against the cabinet, close to the dog's bed. Rex lifted his head and looked at him. I know, Eli said. Don't read into it. Rex put his head back down. Eli sat in the warm kitchen and listened to the house settle. At 3 in the morning, he heard her come down. Soft steps. She came into the kitchen, checked Rex without turning on the overhead light, just the small under-cabinet lamp. She refilled the dog's water bowl. Then she looked at Eli, sitting on the floor. She didn't say anything. She went back upstairs. He stayed where he was until the sky started to lighten. She arrived on a Saturday afternoon in early May. Eli was behind the barn when he heard a car on the dirt road. Not a truck, something lighter. He came around the side of the barn and saw a dark blue sedan parked at the gate. Carol was standing beside it. She was looking at the farm. Not at him. At the garden, the repaired cold frame, the chicken coop, the clean lines of it. The evidence of attention. She looked the way she had always looked when she was processing something she hadn't expected. Ellie walked over. Rex walked with him. Not ahead. At his side, Carol heard them coming and turned. She looked at Eli first, then at Rex. Rex did not go to her. He stopped at Eli's left side and stayed. She noticed that. Her expression shifted slightly. Eli, she said. Carol. She looked good. That was the honest assessment. She was put together, good clothes, and the Missoula relocation had agreed with her externally. But she was carrying something behind the eyes. A weight that good clothes couldn't cover. I should have called, she said. You probably should have. She looked at the garden again. At the new beds, someone else is here, she said. Not a question. Yes, I saw the. She stopped. The garden looks different. Someone's been working on it. Yes, she was quiet. Processing. She's staying here? Yes. Carol looked at him. Who is she? Someone who needed a place to land, he said. She's been helping with the farm. Carol held that. He could see her working through what it meant and what she wanted to do with it. Is it? She stopped again. Never mind. The back door of the house opened. Sarah came out. She'd heard the car. She stopped at the edge of the porch when she saw them. Carol looked at her. Sarah looked at Carol. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Sarah went back inside. No drama. No performance. Just a quiet assessment of a situation and the right response to it. Carol watched her go. "She knew who I am," Carol said. "She knew there was a photograph in the hallway," Eli said. "That's still there?" Yes. Something moved across Carol's face. He wasn't sure what. "Marcus and I," she started. She stopped. "Tried again. I came because I wanted to say something and I didn't want to do it by phone." "All right, Marcus isn't who I thought he was," she said it plainly. No decoration on it. "He was exciting because he was different from you. And different from you turned out to mean something specific that I didn't fully understand when I was choosing it." Ellie waited. "I'm not asking to come back," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I know what I did. I know what it cost." She looked at him steadily. "I just wanted to say it out loud. That I was wrong. Not about everything, but about the most important things." He looked at her. She had always been direct when she was being honest. That was something he'd admired about her. When she was ready to say the real thing, she said it. "I hear you," he said. "I know you can't." She stopped. "I know it doesn't change anything. I just didn't want to leave it unsaid forever. I appreciate you saying it." She looked at the house, at the porch, at the door Sarah had just gone through. "She's good for this place," Carol said. "I can tell from the garden alone." He didn't respond to that. "Are you happy?" she asked. The question sat between them. He turned it over. "I'm better than I was," he said. She nodded, slowly, like that was an acceptable answer and she was going to let it be enough. "Take care of yourself, Eli, you too." She got back in the car. He stood and watched her drive back down the dirt road. Rex watched too. When the car was gone and the sound of the engine had faded, he stood there another moment. He looked at the farm, at the garden, at the house. He thought, that was the last thing owed. Not payment, there was no balance sheet. Just the last piece of the old thing, finally said and sat down. He went inside. Sarah was in the kitchen. She was standing at the counter and she had 2 mugs out, coffee already poured. She didn't look up immediately when he came in. He sat down, she set a mug in front of him. Then she sat down across from him with her own. He wrapped both hands around the mug, looked at the table. At the familiar grain of the wood, she came to say she was sorry, he said. Sarah nodded. She didn't ask for anything. She just wanted it said. "That's worth something," Sarah said. "It is." He looked up. "It's the first time she's done that. Did it help?" He thought about that honestly. "Yes," he said. "I didn't know it would until it happened. But yes." Sarah held her mug. "Good," she said simply. They sat there for a while. The kitchen warm around them. Rex shifting in his bed near the stove. Outside, the May afternoon light fell long and golden across the fields. It was the kind of afternoon that doesn't require anything from you. They let it be that. He arrived on a Tuesday in the 3rd week of May, a white pickup truck, newer, clean. The kind of vehicle that says its owner is doing all right and wants you to know it without being obvious about it. Ellie was at the equipment shed. He saw it come down the road and park outside the gate. He stood where he was. He watched the man get out. Dean Voss was 38 years old and looked it, in a way that was designed to look like 32. Good build, maintained, khakis and a flannel shirt that weren't cheap. He moved with the unhurried ease of someone who believes he's in control of whatever room he's in. Even a dirt road outside a farm gate. He looked at the property without moving toward the gate. Sarah was in the garden. She looked up at the sound of the truck. She went very still. Rex, who had been lying in the shade near the garden, got to his feet. The dog did not move toward the gate. He moved toward Sarah and stood beside her. Close, Ellie walked over from the equipment shed. No rush, steady pace. He kept his hands loose at his sides and he kept his face unreadable, which was not difficult for him. Dean watched him come. When Eli reached the gate, Dean smiled. Easy, practiced. The smile of someone who has used it as a tool long enough that it comes automatically. "Nice property," Dean said. "Thank you. I'm looking for someone. A woman named Sarah Colton. I have reason to believe she might be in this area. What's your business with her?" "Personal," Dean said. "She was living in a property I own in Billings. She left owing 3 months' lease. There's also some business bookkeeping that needs to be completed before I can close my year-end accounts." Ellie looked at him. He thought about Ray's document, the 2 women before Sarah, the civil complaint settled quietly, the way Dean Voss operated just inside the line. He thought about Sarah in the garden, still and watchful. "I don't know anyone by that name," Eli said. Dean's smile stayed in place. His eyes, however, did a very specific thing. A quick scan, To the garden, to Rex, to the house, to Sarah standing 20 feet behind Eli. He didn't call it out. That was interesting. I'd hate for there to be a misunderstanding, Dean said pleasantly. The lease situation is straightforward. A civil matter. I'm not here to cause problems for anyone, I understand, Eli said. And I don't know anyone by that name. So you're in the wrong place. A pause. Dean's eyes moved to the garden again. Sarah was still standing there. She hadn't run. She hadn't moved toward the house. She was standing her ground in her own garden, 10 feet behind the man who'd come to the gate on her behalf, and she wasn't hiding. Ellie noticed that. Filed it all right, Dean said. He took a card from his shirt pocket and held it over the gate. If you happen to run across her, I'd appreciate a call. There's no trouble in it for her. Just some paperwork to sort. Ellie took the card. He didn't look at it. Dean held his gaze for a moment, trying to read something, not finding what he was looking for. Nice dog, Dean said. Rex was still standing beside Sarah. He had not made a sound. Yes, Eli said. Dean walked back to his truck. He got in without hurrying. He took his time with the turn, going slowly on the dirt road, giving himself a long look back at the property as he went. Eli stood at the gate until the truck was gone from sight. He dropped the card in the dirt. Then he turned around. Sarah was still standing where she'd been. Her gloves were in her hands, not on them. She'd pulled them off without knowing she was doing it. Rex was leaning slightly against her leg. Ellie walked over. He's been here before, she said. Her voice was steady, or near here. He doesn't drive 18 miles to ask one farmer. No, Eli said. He's been asking around. She looked at the road where the truck had been. He won't stop, she said. I told you, I know. She looked at him. What do we do? We start making a record, he said, before he does something instead of just showing up. Margaret Payne in Kalispell, she's good. I've talked to her already. She's ready when you are. Sarah was quiet. You talked to a lawyer, she said. Already, a few weeks ago. After the first time I saw you looking over your shoulder at the road. She looked at him. He looked back. There was something moving across her face. Not quite surprise. Something harder to name. Why didn't you tell me? She said. I wasn't sure what I was going to find out, he said. I didn't want to add fear to something I couldn't confirm yet. He paused. I found out enough. What did you find? He told her. Ray's document, the civil complaint, the 2 PD contacts, the pattern. She listened without showing much on her face. But her jaw set in a specific way that said she was absorbing it against something she had already suspected and was now confirmed in knowing. He'll say none of that is real, she said. He always says the women were unstable, I know. That's why we need the record to start now. Before he escalates, he looked at her. Your side of this is clean, Sarah. You have no criminal history. You left a lease early, which is a civil issue, and not a strong one given the circumstances. You have documentation of his business practices because you did his books for 3 years. That's more leverage than you think. She held her gloves in both hands. I've never talked to a lawyer before, she said. About this, Margaret's not hard to talk to, he said. I'll drive you. You can say as much or as little as you want the first time. She looked at him for a long moment. All right, she said. Rex leaned against her leg again. She looked down at him. Then she put her gloves back on and turned back to the garden. I'm going to finish the north bed, she said. Okay, he said. He went back to the equipment shed. He didn't look back at her, but he listened, her footsteps returning to the garden, the soft sound of tools in soil, still here. That was the thing. She had just come face to face with the person she'd been running from for 3 weeks, and she had not run. She had stood in her garden, 10 feet behind him, and she had not flinched. He thought that said something important. He thought he'd known it from the gate. From the hands and the worn shoes and the offer of work instead of a plea. Some people are in the process of becoming smaller. Life pushing them down, experience confirming that they don't have the weight for the resistance. Sarah Colton was not that kind of person. She was the other kind. The kind that gets pushed and finds, in the pushing, that they are more solid than they knew. He picked up his wrench. He went back to work. 3 days later, Sarah found the notebook. It was on the kitchen table. He'd left it there by accident, something he would not have done if he'd been thinking about it. A regular spiral notebook, the kind he used for farm records. But this one had pages near the back that weren't about the farm. Dean Voss. 3 pages. Ray's information transcribed in his own handwriting. Margaret Payne's number, notes from the phone call. A separate section headed Sarah. What she told me with the key points written out. The apartment, the car, the bookkeeping access. The first attempt to leave. The second, he found the notebook on the table when he came in for lunch. Sarah was standing at the counter. She turned when he came in. She had clearly read it. He could see that from the way she was standing. He didn't say anything immediately. He set his gloves on the counter and washed his hands at the sink. "How long?" she said. "From the second week." She looked at the notebook. Then at him. "You wrote down what I told you," she said. "On the porch, I wanted to have it right if I talked to Ray. If I talked to Margaret. I didn't want to get the details wrong in a way that mattered." She was quiet. He turned off the tap and dried his hands. "You should have told me," she said. "Yes," he said. "I should have." She looked at the table. At the notebook. "I'm not angry," she said. "I want to be clear about that. She stopped, looking for the right word. "I'm not sure what I am." He turned to face her. He leaned against the counter and waited. "In 3 years with Dean," she said slowly, "he gathered information about me constantly. That was part of how it worked. He knew things about me that I hadn't directly told him. He found them. He used them to make me feel seen when he wanted me to feel seen, and exposed when he wanted me to feel exposed." She paused. "When I found this," she nodded at the notebook, "my first reaction was that, I understand," he said. "And then I read it." He waited. "You wrote down what I said because you wanted to get it right," she said. "Not to have leverage over me. Not to use it against me. You wanted accurate information so you could help me accurately." She pressed her lips together. "That's different. I know it's different. But it took me a minute to know it." He looked at her. "I should have told you what I was doing," he said again. "That was wrong." "Not to have told you," she nodded. "I'm not." She stopped. "I'm not used to someone doing something in my corner without explaining themselves, and it turning out to be genuinely in my corner." She said it carefully, like she was working it out as she spoke. "With Dean. Things done without explanation always turned out to serve him. Always. So my brain went there first. That makes sense. It's not fair to you. You're not being unfair," he said. "You're being accurate about what you've learned. That's different." She looked at him. He had not moved from the counter. He was not crowding her, not pressing the point. Just standing there, saying the thing, and letting her sit with it. "You talked to a lawyer for me," she said. "Before I knew there was a problem. You got background on him. You kept records so you'd have the details right." She shook her head slightly. "And you did all of that without making me feel like I owed you something for it. Without making it." She searched for the word. "Without making it conditional." He said nothing. "No one has done that for me," she said. "I want you to know that. Not in a long time. Maybe not ever." He looked at the window. "At the fields outside, I wasn't trying to." He stopped. Started again. "I wasn't performing anything. I saw a situation that needed handling and I handled the parts I could without your asking because I wasn't sure you would ask." He paused. "You're not used to asking for help. I could see that from day one." "No," she said quietly. "I'm not. Neither am I," he said. "So I understand the architecture of that." She almost smiled. "Not quite." She picked up the notebook and set it back where it had been. "Thank you," she said. For the second time since she'd arrived. The first time had been in the entry hall on the first day, brief and formal. This one was different. This one had weight in it. He nodded once. Rex came in from the living room and went to his bowl. The sound of him drinking broke the moment, and that was fine. Some moments don't need to be held any longer than they last. "Lunch," Sarah said and turned to the stove. He sat down at the table. He put his hand briefly on the notebook, feeling the cover, then he set it aside and waited for the food. Outside, the Mayfields were green and bright, and the whitefish range stood clean against the sky, and the gate at the end of the dirt road was closed, the way it was supposed to be. And inside, in the kitchen that had been empty for 2 years, there were 2 people eating lunch. Rex between them, the house warm, something building in it that didn't have a name yet, but was real, and solid, and wasn't going anywhere. The drive to Kalispell took 18 minutes. Ely drove. Sarah sat in the passenger seat with her hands in her lap, not fidgeting. Just still in the way she was still when she was thinking hard about something and hadn't finished yet. Rex was in the back. Dr. Tesh had said gentle movement was good. 18 miles in a truck counted as gentle. Eli had decided that. The morning was clear. Late May light, long and flat across the valley. The kind of morning that makes Montana look like a painting and feel like a promise. Neither of them spoke much on the drive. At one point, Sarah looked out the window at the mountains. "Have you been to Margaret's office before?" she asked. "When I bought the farm back," he said. "She handled the title work. Straightforward. What's she like?" He thought about it. "Direct," he said. "She doesn't waste your time and she doesn't expect you to waste hers. She'll ask you the things she needs to know and she won't ask you the things she doesn't." Sarah nodded. Looked back out the window. "I've never told the whole story to someone official," she said. "Someone who writes it down, I know. It's different when it gets written down. Yes, he said. It becomes real in a different way. More solid. What if it doesn't? She stopped. What? What if it doesn't hold up? When it's written down. What if it sounds like nothing? He glanced at her. It won't sound like nothing, he said. It will sound like exactly what it is. She turned back to the window. They drove the rest of the way in quiet. Margaret Payne's office was on the second floor of a brick building on Main Street. Small waiting room. 2 chairs and a plant that was doing all right. Her assistant, a young man named Paul, showed them in without much ceremony. Margaret was 61, short white hair, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She shook Sarah's hand with a firmness that wasn't trying to prove anything and sat down across from her. Eli sat in the chair near the door. Margaret looked at him once. Then at Sarah. Eli told me the basics, she said. I'd like to hear it from you, as much or as little as you want to give me today. There's no wrong amount. Sarah looked at her hands for a moment, then she started talking. She told it straight. Billings, the job, Dean Voss, the apartment and the car and the phone plan and the professional references. The first time she tried to leave and came back. The second time she didn't. 3 weeks of moving. Ending up at a gate 4 miles from town. She left nothing important out. Margaret listened without interrupting. She made notes in a small pad with a pen she held loosely, like someone who has been taking notes for 30 years and doesn't need to grip hard to get it right. When Sarah finished, Margaret set her pen down. Thank you, she said. That was clear. She looked at her notes. I want to ask you about a few specifics. For the next 40 minutes, they went through it. The lease, the bookkeeping access, the civil complaint Sarah hadn't known about from the previous employee. Margaret asked about documentation, what Sarah had taken with her, what was still accessible, what Dean controlled. Sarah had more than she thought. She'd emailed herself copies of certain financial records when she first started considering leaving. She'd done it without a clear plan, just a feeling that she might someday need to prove something. She had photographs of certain lease documents on her phone, taken the day she left. She had 3 years of payroll records she'd processed herself. Margaret looked at the list. This is a good foundation, she said. More than most people come in with. Is it enough? Sarah asked. For what specifically? To make him stop? Margaret looked at her steadily. I'll be honest with you. There's no magic document that makes a person like this stop. What we can do is build walls that make it expensive and risky for him to keep going. She paused. A cease and desist order first. We document his visit to Eli's property. We file a civil harassment complaint using the pattern of contact. We contact Billings PD about the prior incidents to establish the record. If he makes contact again, we escalate. She folded her hands. People like Dean Voss rely on their targets being isolated and without resources. You are neither of those things now. Sarah sat with that. The lease, she said. The lease is not a strong position for him, Margaret said. You left under circumstances consistent with constructive eviction, a legal term for situations where a landlord has made living conditions untenable. Given that the landlord was also your employer and romantic partner and held control over multiple aspects of your life, a judge will not look favorably on a lease claim. She tilted her head slightly. He probably knows that. The lease is a pressure point, not a real threat. Sarah was quiet. How much will this cost? She asked. Direct first phase, cease and desist, filing the complaint, initial documentation. I can do for a flat fee. Margaret named a number. It was not small, but it was not impossible. After that, if it goes further, we talk again. Sarah nodded slowly. Ellie had said nothing the entire meeting. He spoke now. Send the bill to the farm address, he said. Sarah looked at him. He looked back. We'll sort it out, he said. To her, not to Margaret. Sarah held his eyes for a moment. Then she turned back to Margaret. All right, she said. Let's start. On the way back, Sarah was quiet for the first 5 miles. Then she said, You didn't have to do that, I know. The bill, I know what you meant. She looked out the window. I'll pay you back, she said. Whenever, he said. However. Or not, it doesn't matter. It matters to me. He glanced at her. Okay. She was still looking out the window. She said I'm not isolated, Sarah said. Margaret. She said that was the difference, it is. 3 weeks ago I was. She paused. I walked down a road to a gate I'd never seen before, because I had run out of other directions. She turned to look at him. That is a very strange thing to have done. Probably, he said. And you opened the gate. He kept his eyes on the road. Rex didn't warn me off you, he said. She made a small sound, not quite a laugh, but something warm in it. In the back seat, Rex shifted and put his head down. The mountains came back into view as they rounded the last bend before the valley opened up. The farm visible from here on a clear day. The white of the house, the dark of the barn, the green of the fields. Sarah looked at it from a distance. It looks good from here, she said. Always did, Eli said. He turned down the dirt road. The gate was closed. He got out and opened it and drove through and got out and closed it again. Sarah watched him do this without comment. But something in her expression, when he got back in the truck, was different than it had been that morning. Quieter. Settled. Like something had been decided, though nothing had been said. Word travels in small valleys, not through malice, usually, through proximity and repetition, and the way humans have wired to talk about what's changed in the landscape they know well. The woman at the Granger farm had been discussed. Eli knew that without anyone telling him. He'd lived in this valley long enough to understand how it worked. The hardware store, the farm supply, the diner on Route 2 where ranchers stopped for coffee on supply runs. He didn't care what was said. He'd never cared much about that. What he noticed in the weeks after Sarah's visit to Margaret was that the tone of things started to shift. Harold Boone was the first. He came over on a Thursday morning, unannounced, driving his old Ford along the fence line that separated their properties. He stopped and got out and looked at the garden for a long moment without saying anything. Sarah was working the east bed. She looked up. Harold was 68. He'd been farming his land for 30 years since he retired from the post office and came back to his family's property. He was the kind of farmer who didn't romanticize it, just worked it, showed up every day and did what needed doing. His wife, Bonnie, had died 4 years ago. He'd planted the same vegetable garden she'd always planted every spring since then. Eli had seen it from the road. Same layout, same crops. Like a thing kept in her honor, Harold looked at Sarah's beds. "You do the companion planting," he said. "Yes," Sarah said. "Tomatoes with basil, squash with the nasturtiums, and the marigolds along the perimeter for the aphids." Harold looked at the marigold seedlings along the south edge. He nodded slowly. "Not praise exactly. Recognition. Bonnie did it that way," he said. Said it was her grandmother's system. "Nebraska woman." Sarah looked up at that. "My grandmother was Nebraska too," she said. Harold looked at her for a moment. Then he reached into the cab of his truck and brought out a paper bag. "Set it on the fence post. Heirloom tomato seeds," he said. "Bonnie's variety. I save them every year. Never found anyone to give them to." He looked at the garden. "They do well in this soil. Need deep watering." Sarah stood up. She looked at the bag. "Thank you," she said. Harold nodded. Got back in his truck. Drove back along the fence line without looking back. Sarah picked up the bag. She held it for a moment. Then she looked at Eli, who had been watching from the barn doorway. He nodded once. She went back to work. Etta Cole came 2 weeks later. She ran the general store in town. 55 years old, stout, efficient. The kind of woman who had an opinion about everything, and kept most of them to herself because she understood the difference between having an opinion and needing to say it out loud. Sarah had been in the store twice. The first time, 3 weeks after arriving at the farm, Etta had been pleasant and brisk in the way that was really neither. The second time she'd been warmer, asking about the farm. Now Etta appeared at the gate on a Saturday afternoon with a cardboard box. Sarah answered the gate. Etta looked at her directly. Not apologetically, but with the particular directness of someone who has decided to do a thing and is doing it without preamble. "I want to say something," Etta said. "When you came in the first time, I made up my mind about you before I knew anything." She held the box. "That was wrong. It was the easy thing, not the right thing." Sarah looked at her. "I've been watching the Granger farm from a distance for 2 years," Etta continued. "Watching it get quieter and smaller. Watching Eli work himself gray." She set the box on the gatepost. "Whatever you've done there, it shows. And I should have been better to you from the start." She turned to go. "Etta," Sarah said. The woman stopped. "Thank you," Sarah said, "for saying it." Etta looked back at her, nodded, got in her car and drove off. Sarah carried the box to the house. Inside were 2 jars of preserves, a bolt of muslin fabric, and a handwritten card that said, "For the farm, E. Cole." She set it on the kitchen table. Ellie came in from outside and looked at the box. "Etta Cole," Sarah said. He looked at the preserves. "She makes good jam," he said. She apologized. He looked at Sarah. "She came out here to apologize," Sarah said. "I didn't expect that." Ellie looked at the box again. Then out the window. "People around here take their time," he said. "But they usually get there." Sarah opened one of the preserve jars and smelled it. Strawberry. She put the lid back. "I'm starting to understand that," she said. Rex came in and sniffed the box. Ellie took the preserves to the cabinet. He thought about the valley, about the way it held people for a long time before it let them in, about the patience that required, about Carol, who had never quite been let in. who had found the waiting too long, about Sarah, who had not come looking to be let in and was being let in anyway. He thought about how things work out when you stop trying to control the direction. He put the preserves on the shelf and went back to work. It was a Tuesday in early June, 11:30 at night. Ely was in the living room. He hadn't been trying to sleep, just sitting in the chair by the window with a book he wasn't reading. Rex on the floor beside him, the house settled and quiet. Rex's head came up first, not alarmed exactly, alert. A specific quality of attention that said something was coming down the road. Ely set the book down. He went to the window and looked out. Headlights at the far end of the dirt road. Coming slowly. Too slowly for someone who was lost. The speed of someone who was looking at things as they passed. The headlights stopped at the gate. For a moment nothing happened. Then a door opened. Dean Voss got out of his truck. He stood at the gate looking at the house. He didn't rattle it. Didn't call out. Just stood there in the dark looking at the property the way you look at something you've decided belongs to you. Ely went to the hallway. Sarah's door was open. She was awake. Sitting up in bed, the small lamp on. She had heard it too. She looked at him. He looked at her. "Stay here," he said quietly, not a command. A request. She shook her head. "No." He looked at her. "I'm not hiding in my room," she said. Her voice was low, but there was no give in it, not from him, not anymore. He held her eyes for a moment, then he nodded. She got up. She was already dressed. She had been sitting in bed with her clothes on, which told him she'd been expecting this, or something like it, for longer than tonight. They went downstairs together. Rex was already at the front door. Ely opened it and stepped out onto the porch. Sarah came out behind him. She stopped at his right shoulder, not behind him. Beside him, Dean was still at the gate. He saw them come out and he didn't move. He watched Ellie walk down off the porch, across the yard, to the gate. He stopped on his side of it. The two men looked at each other through the bars. Dean looked calm. That was the thing about him. He always looked calm. It was the most useful tool he had. "Late for a visit," Ely said. "I know," Dean said. "I apologize for that." He looked past Ely to Sarah, standing on the porch. "I just need 10 minutes with Sarah. That's all. 10 minutes and I'll go." "She doesn't want 10 minutes with you," Ely said. "She can tell me that herself." "She already told you that herself," Ely said, "at this gate, 3 weeks ago." The answer was no then, and it's the same answer now. Dean looked at Sarah. Sarah, his voice changed slightly, softer. The version of his voice that had been designed specifically for her. "I'm not angry. I just want to talk. You know me. You know I'm not, Dean." Sarah's voice carried clear across the yard. No, one word, the way she'd said it before. Simple, without decoration. Dean was quiet. Ellie watched him calculate. He could see it happening. The reading of the situation. The assessment of what angles were available. "She's been here 6 weeks, Dean said, his voice back to its pleasant baseline. Talking to Ely now, not Sarah. "You know her 6 weeks. I've known her 3 years. I think I have a clearer picture of—" "You don't get to tell me what picture I have," Ely said. "I'm just saying, I know what you're saying." Ely kept his voice level. "No heat in it. Just wait. You're saying that time equals ownership. That knowing someone longer means knowing them better. That 3 years of control is worth more than 6 weeks of watching someone become who they actually are when no one's managing them." He paused. "I disagree." Dean looked at him. Rex had come down off the porch. He was standing at Eli's left side. He made no sound. His body was absolutely still in the particular way that is not relaxation. "I have a legal matter," Dean said. "The lease. The bookkeeping. Take it to your attorney," Ely said. "Margaret Payne in Kalispell represents Sarah's interests. You can contact her office Monday morning during business hours." He reached into his back pocket and held out a card. Margaret had given him several. Her number. Dean looked at the card. He didn't take it. "This isn't how this works," he said. His pleasant tone had thinned. "Just slightly." "Enough to be real, it is now," Ely said. Silence. The night was very quiet around them. Stars out over the valley. The fields dark and still. Dean looked at Sarah one more time. She was standing on the porch with her arms at her sides. Looking at him. Not afraid. Not performing. Not afraid. Just present. The way you're present when you've made a decision and are standing on the right side of it. Something shifted in Dean's face. Not much, but it was the first time Ely had seen anything unplanned happen in that face. "You think you know what you're involved in," Dean said to Ely, quietly. "The pleasantness gone now. I know enough," Ely said. Dean looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then he turned and walked back to his truck. He got in. He didn't slam the door. He closed it carefully, the way someone closes a door, when they want you to know they're in control of themselves. He turned the truck around and drove back down the road. Ely watched until the taillights disappeared. Then he turned. Sarah was still on the porch. Rex walked back to her and stood beside her. Ely came across the yard and up the porch steps. She was looking at the road where the truck had gone. "He'll file the paperwork Monday," she said. "He'll do it through an attorney, officially. He'll make it as inconvenient as possible." "Yes," Ely said. "Probably. He's going to make this last a while." "Yes." He stood beside her. "And Margaret is going to make it cost him more than he's used to paying." Sarah looked at the road. "I've been afraid of him for 3 years," she said. Ellie waited. "Right now," she said. Standing here, she paused. "I'm not." He looked at her. She turned to look at him. "I don't know if that's permanent," she said. "I don't know if tomorrow I wake up and I'm afraid again. I've been afraid a long time. It doesn't just go." "No," he said. "It doesn't just go, but right now," he said. She looked back at the road. The empty road, the gate closed, the dark fields on either side. "He closed the door carefully when he left," she said. "Did you notice that?" "Yes, that's him. That's always been him. Everything measured and controlled. Even when he's angry, I know. It used to make me feel like the uncontrolled one," she said. "Like because he was calm, I was the problem." "That's how it's designed," Ely said. She was quiet. "I know that now," she said. "I've known it for a while. Knowing it and feeling it stop working on you are different things." Rex put his head against her leg. She put her hand on him. They stood on the porch for a while. The night around them, quiet and wide and cold in the particular June way of Montana nights that stay cool, even when the days are warm. At some point Ely said, "You should sleep." "So should you," she said. He almost said, "I don't sleep well." He'd said that before. Instead said, "I'll try." She looked at him. Something in that registered. "Good," she said, and went inside. He stood on the porch another few minutes. Rex stayed beside him. The gate at the end of the road was closed. He had not moved it. He went inside. He checked the locks. All 3 doors. All the windows. Then he went to bed. He slept 4 hours straight, which was the most he'd slept in recent memory. He didn't analyze that. He just let it be. June moved through the valley the way good months do. Without asking permission. Without making promises it couldn't keep. Just day after day of clear light and warm soil, and the long dusk that stretched to 9 o'clock and made the evenings feel like gifts. Dean's attorney contacted Margaret the following Monday, as predicted. The lease claim and the bookkeeping dispute filed formally. Margaret responded within 48 hours with the cease and desist documentation, the civil harassment filing, and a formal letter noting Sarah's 3 years of financial records and the pattern of controlling behavior documented therein. Margaret called Ely on a Wednesday. His attorney replied today, she said. "And?" "They're backing off the lease claim. Said their client is willing to waive outstanding amounts in exchange for the return of certain business documents. The financial records." "Yes. Sarah's not returning them," Ely said. "I assumed as much," Margaret said. "I told them the documents are in the possession of my client and will be retained as part of an ongoing civil matter." That's the end of the lease conversation. What about the harassment filing? "That one will take longer. But he's been served. He knows the record exists now. People like him don't like having a record." She paused. "He'll be more careful. That's usually what happens in the first phase. They pull back, assess their exposure, decide whether it's worth it, and if he decides it is, then we go further. But I don't think he will. He's a businessman. He calculates. The cost-benefit right now is not in his favor." Ellie was quiet. "Take care of her," Margaret said, "not clinically." "Like a person." "Yes," he said. He hung up. Sarah was in the garden when he went out to find her. He told her what Margaret had said. She listened. She kept her hands in the soil while she listened, like she needed something steady under her while she took it in. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "It's not over," she said. "No. But he's on the back foot now." She turned the soil with her hand. Slowly, "I never thought I'd have a record," she said, "of what he did. Something written down, official. Something that says, this happened, this is what it was. Now you do." She looked at her hands in the soil. "When I left," she said, "I thought I was just running, just getting out. I didn't think about what came after. I didn't have a plan for what came after." She paused. "I just needed to get to somewhere I could breathe." Ely crouched down at the edge of the garden bed. "Not helping, just nearby. You got there," he said. She looked at him. "I did," she said, something simple in it. No performance. Just a fact being confirmed. Rex came over from the shade and lay down at the edge of the bed between them. The 3 of them stayed like that for a while. The June sun on the garden. The soil dark and ready. The rain came in the 2nd week of July. Not the polite kind. The real Montana kind that comes out of the northwest and settles in for days. Heavy drops on the barn roof, steady rhythm. The sound that fills the house and makes everything outside irrelevant. The work moved inside, equipment maintenance in the barn, inventory of stored seed. Planning for the second half of the growing season, on the second day of rain, Sarah reorganized the storage room off the kitchen. The room that had been closed since Eli moved in, full of his father's things and some of Carol's things she hadn't taken, and boxes Eli hadn't opened. She asked him first. "You don't have to," he said. "I know," she said, "but it needs doing." He gave her the room. By the afternoon she had it sorted. His father's tools in one section, properly stored. Carol's things in a box labeled clearly. A space cleared that could be useful. She found things she didn't ask him about and set aside. She found things she did ask him about. One was a small wooden box. She brought it to him in the kitchen. "Do you know what this is?" He looked at it. His father's handwriting on the lid. Just the date. August 1987. He opened it. Inside was a photograph and a folded letter. The photograph was his parents on what looked like a road trip. Young, laughing, his mother's arm out the window. His father driving with one hand, looking at her instead of the road. The letter was from his father to his mother. Written and never sent, apparently. Long, careful sentences about love and distance, and the difficulty of saying the right thing at the right time. Eli read the first paragraph. Then he refolded it. He looked at Sarah. She was looking at the photograph. "They look happy," she said. "They were," he said. Most of the time, she set the photograph on the table beside the box. "Your father wrote like someone who thought about things for a long time before he said them," she said. Ellie looked at the folded letter. "That's where I get it from," he said. She looked at him, then not saying it right away. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "He sent the letter eventually?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. "I never knew about it until now." She looked at the box. At the unsent letter. "Maybe that's why he kept it," she said. "Because he hadn't sent it. Because it still needed saying." Ellie looked at the letter. He thought about that for a long time after she'd gone back to the storage room. That evening the rain was still going. Full dark outside, the sound of it steady against the windows. Rex in his spot near the stove. Eli made dinner for once. Something simple. He was a decent cook when he tried, as he'd told Carol the night he'd admitted it to Sarah. Venison that Harold Boone had given him at the start of winter, still in the freezer. Potatoes from Sarah's garden. Something passable. Sarah set the table without being asked. They ate. The rain made everything in the kitchen more contained, more present. The outside very far away and the inside very specific and close. After dinner she was washing up, and he was drying. And somewhere in that domestic, ordinary thing something shifted in the room. Not dramatically. Just the way the air changes when the truth is getting close to the surface. He set down the dish he was drying. "Sarah," he said. She kept her hands in the water. "Yes, I need to say something," he said. "I've been thinking about it for a while, and I've been doing what my father did, which is thinking about it instead of saying it." She turned off the tap. She turned around and leaned against the counter, arms loose at her sides. She looked at him. "I don't know exactly when it changed," he said. "The first week you were here, I was practical about it. You needed somewhere, and the farm needed work, and it was a fair arrangement. That's all it was." He paused. "But that's not all it is now. And I think you know that. And I think I've been not saying it the way my father didn't say things, and I don't want to do that." She was very still. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not because the farm needs you, though it does. Not because Rex chose you, though he did." He looked at her. "Because I want you here. Because this house is different with you in it, and I don't want it to go back to what it was. The rain on the roof. Rex breathing steady near the stove." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. "You know my whole situation," she said. "Yes. Dean's attorney, Margaret, the legal process still going. The fact that I came to your gate with a bag and worn-out shoes and no plan. Yes, none of that changes this for you. None of it," he said. She looked at her hands, then back at him. "I've been careful," she said, "about this. Since I got here, I've been very careful not to mistake shelter for something else. Not to build something in my head that wasn't real because it was easier than facing what I came from." "That's good," he said. "But," she stopped. "But," he said. She met his eyes. "It's real," she said. "Whatever this is, it's real. I know the difference now between something that's real and something that's been constructed to feel that way." She paused. "This is real." He looked at her. "Okay," he said. She almost smiled. It was the word he always used when something had said settled. She had noticed that about him weeks ago. "Okay," she said back. Rex lifted his head. Looked at both of them. Put his head back down. They stood in the kitchen while the rain went on outside, neither of them moving toward the other, and neither of them needing to. Just standing in the same room, the truth finally said, the thing finally named. It was enough, for now, it was exactly enough. August came with heat and clarity. The fields went gold at the edges. The garden behind the house, which had been Sarah's project from the first week, was producing more than the two of them could eat. Tomatoes, squash, beans, the early greens already done, and the second planting coming in. Harold Boone's heirloom tomatoes, Bonnie's variety, he'd said, were coming up red and heavy, and tasting like something from a different era. Sarah canned. She had found the old canning equipment in the storage room she'd reorganized, and she brought it back into use with the focus she brought to everything. Rows of jars on the counter, the kitchen smelling of vinegar and summer. Etta Cole's preserves were on the shelf beside them. The farm looked like a farm that was being farmed. Ellie noticed it every morning. Not because it was surprising anymore, but because he wanted to keep noticing it. He didn't want it to become something he stopped seeing. Margaret called in mid-August. Dean's attorney has informed us they're withdrawing all claims, she said. The lease, the bookkeeping. All of it. Ellie was standing in the kitchen. Sarah was at the table with her planning notebook. He's done? Eli said, for now. The harassment filing is on record. He's been warned formally twice. His attorney clearly told him the math doesn't work. A pause. He may try something else later. I won't promise you he's finished permanently. But this particular pressure is done. Thank you, Margaret. Take care of her, she said again. Same tone as last time. He hung up. Sarah was looking at him. He told her. She set her pen down. She looked at the table, at her notebook, at the rows of canned jars on the counter. She stood up and walked to the window and looked out at the garden. He waited. It doesn't feel like I thought it would, she said. No? I thought it would feel like winning something. She paused. It just feels quiet. Is that bad? She thought about it. No, she said. Quiet is what I've been trying to get to. She turned from the window. I've been running or afraid or bracing for something for 3 years. The last 3 months is the longest I've gone without that. How does it feel? She looked at him. A real look. The kind that doesn't have anything held back behind it. Like standing on solid ground, she said. Like I forgot what that felt like, and now I remember. He looked at her. He thought about the gate. About the hinges groaning when he opened it. About Rex stepping back to make room. About a woman who'd walked 4 miles and made an offer instead of a plea and hadn't looked back. He thought about what gets built when two people who have both lost things stop managing their distance and start showing up instead. He thought about his father's letter in the wooden box. The things that go unsent. He was not going to be that, Sarah, he said. She looked at him. Stay, he said, not the first time he'd said it. But different now, not practical, not cautious, just the plain real thing. She held his eyes. I'm staying, she said. Rex got up from his spot near the stove. He walked to the center of the kitchen, turned around once and lay down between them. Sarah looked down at him, then at Eli. This time she did smile. Full and unguarded and entirely real. He didn't smile back, because he rarely did, but something in his face opened. She saw it. That was enough. September. The light in Flathead Valley in September is different from every other month. Longer shadows. The gold that comes into the hills. Something in the air that is not yet cold but is no longer summer. A feeling of completion that is not the same as ending. Eli was up before the sun. He always was. He came downstairs in the dark and went to the kitchen and started the coffee, the old routine. But the kitchen was different from what it had been a year ago. And he knew it and was glad. Sarah's garden notebook on the table. Her jacket on the hook by the back door instead of his. Rex's bed near the stove, the wool blanket folded back, because Rex had been sleeping on top of it in the warmer nights. He stood at the window with his coffee and looked at the fields. The first pale light was coming over the mountains to the east. The garden was as in its late-season abundance. The squash had sprawled and needed harvesting before the first frost. The tomatoes done, the plants finished, pulled up and composted back. The beans still going. He looked at Harold Boone's fence line in the distance. He thought about Bonnie's tomato seeds in this soil. About knowledge that passes through hands. About what gets preserved and what gets passed on. He heard her on the stairs. She came into the kitchen with her hair not yet arranged. Her feet in the old wool socks she'd found in the storage room and claimed without asking, which he had never minded. She looked at the coffee. She poured a cup and stood beside him at the window. They looked at the fields together. The light came up slowly over the mountains. Rex got up from his bed and stretched and came to stand at the back door. Ready to go out. Ready for the day's work, whatever it was going to be. Sarah opened the back door for him. He went out into the September morning. She came back to the window. North bed needs to come out this week, she said. Before the frost, I'll clear the equipment shed side, he said. We can run the compost through before the ground freezes hard. She nodded. The garlic goes in October. I want to get the beds ready. You have a variety picked? Harold gave me some of Bonnie's. Same thing he does with the tomatoes. Saves the best. Ellie looked at the fields. He's becoming a resource, he said. He's lonely, she said, and he doesn't know how to say so. So he gives seeds. Ellie thought about that. The farm supply store has the row cover you wanted, he said. I'll pick it up Thursday. They stood at the window. The light came fully over the mountains now and fell across the valley, and the fields went from gray to green to gold in the space of a few minutes, the way they did every morning. Rex was somewhere near the garden. The house was warm. He looked at Sarah. She was looking at the fields, her hands around her mug. Something settled in her face that had not been there in the first weeks. Not just the absence of fear, something positive, something that grows in a person when they have been somewhere long enough to put down roots. He thought about what she'd said, like standing on solid ground. Like I forgot what that felt like and now I remember. He thought about what had been here before she came. The clean, empty house, the managed loneliness, the farm that was functional but not alive. He thought about a gate with groaning hinges that he had opened on an afternoon in late March, because a dog he trusted hadn't warned him off. He thought about what gets built when you stop protecting yourself from the possibility of something good. He turned his coffee mug in his hands. Sarah, he said. She looked at him. Thank you, he said. She looked at him for a moment. She knew what he meant. Not for the garden or the cooking or the farm records or any of the practical things, for the thing underneath all of that. For showing up at a gate and offering work instead of a plea, for staying when it would have been easier to go, for the slow, patient business of making a house feel like a home again. She knew and he knew she knew. Thank you, she said back. Not the same thank you, her own. He nodded. They stood at the window and drank their coffee, while the September light came down over the valley, and the mountains stood clean against the sky, and Rex moved through the garden doing what he did. Every morning, nose to the ground, checking the borders of the world he'd decided to protect. The gate at the end of the road was closed. It had been closed every night since late March. Inside, the house held 2 people and 1 dog and something that had no single name but was made of all the small things. Coffee in the morning, hands in soil, doors checked before bed, seeds saved and passed on, the particular quiet of 2 people who have said the real things and don't need to keep proving them. Ely looked at his coffee. He thought, some things don't announce themselves, they just arrive, quietly, at the end of a dirt road, and you open the gate, and that's enough to begin.